Hi there, my name is Kelly Cody Grimm,
And I'm Max Grimm.
and we are Creative Actors Lab. What we want to do is just talk a little bit about how you can bring creativity into your everyday life. Hey everybody, it's Kelly.
And Max.
And today we are going to talk about writing, and that's whether you're a poet like Max or somebody that does other types of writing like short stories and novels, and then I also write screenplays. So we're going to just talk a little bit more about the process, what different tools there are there for you. And Max, I'm going to have you kick it off because I know you have a lot of different thoughts on it.
I do. In no particular order, it starts like this. One thing I've told actors in general, especially the new people, one of the most frustrating things about acting is you got to sit around and wait for somebody to pick up the phone and go, "Hey kid, you got the part." And there's a lot of rejection, and that's just how this stuff goes. That's the nature of the business. Don't take it personally, but that's how it goes. But one thing I would say, and I've said this to so many people, it's like, write your own material. Learn how to create your own material. Don't be, unless you really, really, really have got some kind of a mental block about writing, do your best to get over it, because you really do need to create your own material. If you're going to be waiting for other people to bring it to you, you're just not going to be able to work your craft and perfect your art. We're just not perfect, but how to master your art by waiting for somebody else to bring you something. And you just, I would honestly say, just, even if you don't consider yourself a writer, carry a notebook with you all the time and write down as many thoughts as you have. I don't care how ridiculous they are, how inane you think they are, how whatever. I remember seeing a documentary about Mick Jagger, and he basically carries a notebook with him like all the time, and just writes down every thought, every intuition, every lyric, every observation that would come to him. So when it comes time to go into the studio and start putting stuff down, he's got so much material. And that's really a good place to be in, because just start creating your own material. Even if you don't think you're a good writer, the only way you're going to get better is by doing it. Just write. Even if you think you are the stinkiest writer, if it's a chore and it's laborious and boring and all that, just start writing it down. If nothing else, keep a journal as much as is possible. Even as an actor, it does help. Just you can track your progress. What that leads me to say next is, I'm the sort of person, I never think I'm doing enough. Ever. I don't care if we're talking about writing, acting, teaching, working in the professional kitchens, I never think I'm doing enough. And then every once in a while, I do a review of stuff like what I have been doing the past about year or so, between the visual art that I've done over the years and the writing. And I just, kind of, once you do that, I'll just sit back and go, my God, I've done a lot of stuff here. And it's very, to me anyway, it's a very satisfying thing to sort of prove yourself wrong in that way. And you never know what's going to come out, and you never know how your writing is going to affect people. There's a couple of things I'll say. That back when I was still in school, when I was going to college, I was, of all things, I was taking a ballet class, because in the acting program you have to study some dance and things like that. So I'm taking a ballet class, and I was not looking for this. I did not, do anything to bring us on, but there was this young lady in the class. Also, turned out she was going to be the editor of the college newspaper in the next year. And she walked up to me and said, "Do you write?" And I went, "Yeah, I do actually." And and I've been writing poetry for years, and I've done a bunch of poetry readings, and I got into some journals and whatnot. But it's kind of just one of those things I just did. And I said, "Yes, I do write." And she's like, "If you have any examples of your writing, would you like to write your own column? And you actually get paid a couple $100 a semester to do this." And I'm like, okay. And I went and I just, I went back to my notebooks and I took out like the handwritten loose leaf stuff. And it was as sloppy of a presentation as I could ever possibly be. But she's like, this is really good. And then she gets then she shows it to the young woman who's a friend of hers, who was the outgoing publisher of the college, or editor, excuse me, of the college newspaper. And they're sitting down and she's looking at my stuff going, this is really good. And I'm like, really?
Was it handwritten or
Yeah.
typed? Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Handwritten on yellow legal sheets and loose leaf paper in my chicken scratchy handwriting. And I wound up writing the column for 2 years. And and I was involved in the theater program at the time, and I was working and all this, and I would sit up till, I'd get all that done, then I'd sit up till 3, 4 o'clock in the morning and just start doing the stream of consciousness writing. And I was like, and I was turning it in, and they were going, okay, cool. And I never really heard much about it for quite a while. It's like, okay, I'm just sort of doing this. I'm in my own little bubble here, and I'm putting the stuff out. And all of a sudden, we had at the college, there was a gifted high school arts program that would come into the school for the latter part of the day. And one of the instructors was also a theater critic for a local newspaper. And I didn't know this. And then it just got back around to me one day, but it's like this drama teacher, this theater critic, was actually taking parts of my columns every week and having the students do monologues of it.
Wow.
And I had no clue, like, whatsoever, that this was going on. And I was like, really? Because, I mean, I would write, because I had so many influences. I was, Dylan Thomas and Shakespeare. And I was really into, like, Federico Garcia Lorca and William Burroughs and Bukowski and all these people. And so apparently she'd been doing this for a while, and I had absolutely no clue of it until some of these students, the high school students, I would say, is that what you guys are doing? It's like, yeah, and I was just floored. I was absolutely just floored about it. And I think it's one of the nicest compliments I've ever gotten, that, that you're using my writing as part of your curriculum to teach these kids. And I was like, wow. The other thing, I've always have had this great love of short films, and I've done a lot of, I've written essays and poetry and scripts and all this stuff, but I've always had this great love of short films, and that, you've got to tell a complete story inside of 15 minutes, 20 minutes.
Or less.
And so I wrote a bunch of short films and sent them out in festivals, and they got played in festivals and all that sort of thing. That was really cool. But I don't think I've ever told the story to anyone outside of you and a few people. I wrote this short film called The Red and the Black, and it was 3 characters, and it was an extremely dark comedy. And it was basically about 3 government-employed professional torturers who were trying to get information. And my character was told something by this victim that you never saw, but was told something that absolutely blew my mind, or blew the character's mind. And I couldn't speak about it, so the 2 people who were my torture partners, my workmates,
Co-workers,
so to speak, they had to take it upon themselves to torture my character to see what it is I had learned from this victim. And I think the thing that was most disturbing about it wasn't like, this is an American government, or this is a European, or like a political, or a socialist, or a democratic, or it was kind of, this could be anywhere and anything. There was no pointing fingers at, look what this society does, or look what, that country does. Or there was none of that. And so I sent it off to all these festivals. It got played in quite a few places. And then one day I get a letter. I get an official letter from the government of New Zealand.
Mm-hmm.
And it is
Auckland.
the most politely worded letter, and it's on this official government of New Zealand letterhead and all this stuff. And basically, apparently at the time, this is probably about the mid 90s. This is before
it's
the
before we
daughters
had
were born.
babies. Yeah.
And I get this letter that says, just so you know, there's a couple of arts festivals and there's a few film festivals in New Zealand, and they're all overseen by the government. And basically, what you have submitted to us here, we find very disturbing. And because of that, I got banned, folks, a lifetime ban from New Zealand. I can never, ever submit anything. I'm not even sure I could go to the country at this point. At this point, it's been 30 something years. So, or it's been close to 30 years. And, but I mean, it was so politely worded. But it was basically, don't ever submit this trash to us again, ever, you low-life scumbag degenerate, you. In so many words. But
it was more like New Zealand people.
It was so politely worded. But at the same time, it was like, what in the name of all that is good and holy have you presented to us? What is this abomination? How dare you? Don't ever darken our door again, you scumbag, you. And I'm like, wow. And I kind of
here's a nerve. You touched it.
I kind of actually, every time I think back on that, I was like, that's a badge of honor.
Mm-hmm.
Because
have an entire
you
country
can't, because whether you love something or hate, it's like, I presented something, it's like, you cannot be ambivalent about this. Mm-hmm. You can't, see this thing and then be thinking, well, what am I going to make for dinner? And,
mm-hmm.
whatever. But it just tickles me to this day that I got that, and it was just so hysterically.
You've heard from other people though that the same thing happened to them, right? I think
here and there.
Yeah.
Here and there. But
the country of Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, I've been banned. And I think it was I'll just say the film itself was about, I think, 17, 18 minutes long. It was 3 characters, 1 room location, this torture cell, and just a very, economic bit of dialogue. And it was very dark, but it was pretty funny. Mm-hmm. And it had that effect on people. And I was like, I really gotta, I was like, good for you, kid. You done good. You pissed off a whole entire country.
And you had recorded that and then made copies on VHS, mm-hmm. right? So do you have a copy of that somewhere?
Probably. I probably
be curious to look at it. Here we are 30 years later, maybe almost. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was 1995 when I want to say. But in any case, I just, that just tickles me absolutely pink.
Mm-hmm. It was the Red and the Black, but not Gentlemen in Black.
No.
Okay.
No. The other thing, I'll say this. For me personally, my process in writing is I sit down to write when I have to, when it's like, I got to get this on paper right now, before it, sprouts wings and flies out of my brain. Because I once heard, I think this applies really to pretty much any kind of writing, any kind of creative writing. I heard that, it's poetry when you feel yourself physically affected, when you read it. When you read something and you either feel tears coming on or you get, the righteous indignation. Mm-hmm. And as I say, I always feel like I never am doing enough. I could always be doing more. But in the past about 12 months, 12 to 18 months, I have been going back and, gathering all of the visual art and the photography and the writing and the resume of all the shows I directed and all this stuff. And it's kind of like, it's just very gratifying to look back. And it's kind of like here in this part of Georgia that we live in, we've got a lot of hills. And I always think of just kind of this metaphor of like, I'll be out hiking and I'll start going up a hill and I'll keep going up the hill and it gets more and more arduous and laborious and I'll see it's like, geez, I really haven't hiked that far. And then at some point or other, I turn around and I was like, look at how far up this mountain you are, dude.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same thing. It's like, okay, yeah, I'm not giving myself enough credit. I still have much to learn in my life. I still, as an artist, as a creative person, I have got so much more to do and so much to explore and discover and share. But at the same time, I just find that I just don't give myself enough credit. And it's like going back through the writing, and particularly when I start going back through some of these things that I'd written maybe 15, 20 plus years ago, and just looking back going, wow, that's where my head was at. And I come to understand myself better when I'm able to look back, particularly on the writing, because I just honestly have come to a point as a creative person. It's like, I'm not going to go out and intentionally try to push people's buttons, or I'm not trying to make anybody laugh. I'm not trying to get people to think. I'm just writing it down because this is what it feels right to do now, and then just put it out there. And as Tennessee Williams once said, words to the effect of, the hardest part of writing is letting go of your little darlings, because you never know how people are going to respond to this stuff.
Or if you're a playwright or a screenwriter, once you've written it, unless you're directing it and starring in it, you don't have a whole lot of control about how...
You don't.
Yeah.
You don't have any control of how people are going to interpret it. How the actors are going to interpret. One example I will use, there's a play called Line. Israel Horovitz, written back in the 60s. It's basically a 5-character bare stage play. And the characters are kind of, I don't want to say caricaturish, but caricaturish, kind of
prototypes.
Kind of, sort of. But it's been playing, I'm not sure if it's still playing, but it played off Broadway for like something crazy, like 20 or 30 years. And they had this cast revolving in and out, and it was always the cast was always kind of being given free rein as to interpret these characters however you want. And so all these different characterizations would come on top of it. And that play ran off Broadway, I say, for like 30 years or 25 or 30 years. And it's because the playwright kind of said, I'm going to step back. You guys, I've done my part. You guys come in and you sort of take this thing the next mile. And that can be very difficult for writers in general, is to let go of the little darlings, particularly when it comes to scripts, and the stuff is going to come out of other people's mouths, and they're going to put their own spins on it, and they're going to bring their personalities, their histories, their experiences, their opinions, their perceptions, and all of that stuff, and you have no control over that. And for a lot of writers, that's a tough one.
And I think particularly if you're a new writer, because you don't have, I've been writing for a minute, and we've got a catalog of over 230 monologues. I've got 3 pilot scripts. I'm working on my 3rd screenplay. I've got a whole thing of short stories. I'm, working on my 2nd novel, and now maybe starting another young adult novel. And so, over time, just because you've done enough, you're not nearly as sensitive about it, because I guess you have enough of those little darlings that you're like, oh, okay, well, if this one gets, tossed around a little bit, I'm okay with it. But I think new writers, it's really difficult to see your stuff interpreted. And, I'll kind of dovetail into last night. So the other night we had a table read, and it was one of the students that takes my screenwriting class, Brandon Winget. And he had written this screenplay called Dirty Cop, but he had written some other scripts as well. But this one he really finished, I mean, just on fire. And I'm always amazed at how fast he can turn around scripts. But it was his first one, and I had given him suggestions. It was like the third or fourth draft. This is what you want to do. This is, maybe what you don't want to do. And, so he went through the drafts, took my suggestions. Then he submitted it to the free Script Lab film screenplay contest, and then also got notes back. And I think he got 2 sets of notes back. And honestly, I thought the notes that he got back were really good. They were legitimate. They pointed out the strengths and the weaknesses of what was going on. Mm-hmm. And so I thought that was really good. And then last night, he got to hear it out loud. And the thing is, for a lot of writers is, usually if you're writing a novel or a short story, unless you're doing the Audible book yourself, a lot of times you're not hearing it out loud for yourself. But when you're doing a table read as the screenwriter, yes, you hear it out loud. And more often than not, and we've, said that if you go on a place, and I'll put this link in the notes, the Script Lab, you will pick up, there's thousands of scripts there. And some of them are the actual shooting draft. Some of them are the first drafts, and you will see how different things have evolved when you look at like the pilot script for Breaking Bad. That was not set in New Mexico originally. It was in Northern California. And it kind of changed a little bit how Walter White, and you could see some of the scenes that were used in the pilot were used in other episodes. Same thing with Veep. Mm-hmm. Same thing with BoJack Horseman and Succession, things like that. So if you look at those, particularly as a writer, you're going to see, oh, okay, it changes, it evolves. They said, maybe this doesn't work here, but maybe in a separate episode. I've had people tell me that about, the stuff that I've written. But I think what was really helpful for him was hearing it out loud, including the action lines. Mm-hmm. He went, wow, it's a little repetitive and this. And I'm like, yeah, but this is all part of the process. Mm-hmm. We did a table read of one of my scripts with ghost hunters, and my ghost hunters were on page 20. And I'm like, they're kind of pivotal. I need to drop them into scene 4. They need to be on like the 5th or 6th page. So, experienced writers, this is all part of the process, and no one's going to sit back and go, oh no, I got it totally handled first draft. I don't know of anything that goes its first draft, unless sometimes that's kind of the pitfall with self-publishing, is a lot of times people who self-publish, they don't run it through a critique group. And that's something for writers out there. If you can find a good critique group of other writers that you're going to look at their writing and give them feedback, and then they give you feedback, that is such an amazing thing. So if you are a writer and you can get into a critique group, and there are people that are kind of on the same wavelength as you, are going to be offering you solid feedback, you can offer them, because reading other people's work and critiquing that, for me personally, has really helped my writing. In fact, I decided to dust off a short story the other day, and I'm like, oh, let me submit this. One of the ladies in my critique group said, some of these ghost stories of the medium when she's younger, I think that might make some good young adult novels. And I'm like, well, you know what?
Yeah.
Yes, and I have one that's, one of my pilots is based on The Lioness Kills Tonight, but I'm like, yeah, there's a lot of young Sophia. Yes, and thank you. And I wouldn't have thought to do that. So I'm like, okay, let me dust off this. And I had written this like 5 or 6 years ago, and just looking at it, I'm like, you could tell this was the phase of my journey where I was still a script writer and not so much a narrative writer, and you can tell in this. So I thought it would go a lot faster than it did. I made improvements, and, overall the story was good. But again, for me, I had to kind of, when we were talking about the creative brain, where you had to break and then blend and, bend it, break it, and then blend it. That's what I ended up having to do. And that's all part of the creative writer's process. But getting back to Brandon, I think it was really helpful for him to go, oh, and he was giving himself the critical feedback, which I loved hearing, because it's like, good, you're being open to that. Because again, sometimes new writers, you're like, no, then I'm terrible. And it's like, no writer. I mean, Stephen King will tell you, I think Carrie's a pretty good book. I think if I were going to go back, I would change some things. He writes about 6 pages a day, which is awesome. But his team will sit there and edit it down from, 1,500 pages down to about, 500-600. He may have 1,000-page book, but his team's sitting there going, you're going to have to cut about a third of this. And he knows that. He's like, yeah, let me just kind of explore stuff and then I'm going to cut it down. But, those are just some of the things about the creative journey.
Really, for any of your art, but for writing in particular, because it is a very solitary practice. What I found for me was always very surprising, and particularly back when blogs were a thing. I started to write a blog. It's still up as far as I know, but it was called A River Between Chaos and Zen. I wrote, and I didn't plan this. It just wound up being, I wrote a blog every week. I published it on Sunday mornings. I did one every week for 52 weeks of I did one full year. And I never had a plan for this thing. I was like, let me just start somewhere, because the old saying goes, if you don't start somewhere, you wind up nowhere. And that's what I did. So, and so I'm writing this thing, and I'm just kind of like writing it, and then, click publish, and then walk away. And then and it's doing how it's doing. I don't care. People are reading it. They're not. It's not my business. I just need to keep writing this. And after a while, it started getting back to me in ways that it was being presented to me, but, people started, because I was doing like a series of like art exhibits at the time. I was getting to like group art shows and whatever, and people I barely knew were walking up to me going, I love your blog. And I'm like, how do you know about this? How did this information get out? And then, but it was just, then there were some of the ones, and I got this also when I was writing in the college paper. Again, I had no plan. I was just like, let's just write it down, whatever seems to be the right thing to do, just be genuine, be authentic, and get it on paper and get it out there. When you start inadvertently, in my case anyway, pushing their buttons, I wasn't writing anything to get a rise out of anybody in any way.
That's so counter to our culture now.
But yeah, but I didn't do that. I mean, it's like if somebody reads it and they think it's great, or that pisses them off, or they think it's crap, or whatever they think is what they think, I have no control over that. But it's just, as I say, for me, writing is a sort of a thing. Like, I start writing when I have no other choice. When I've got to get this on, this is too important. I've got to make a note of this somewhere, somehow. And that's what I do. And then when you start putting that stuff out there, and all of a sudden it's like you're getting these people coming out of nowhere with whatever their commentary is, whether they love it, they hate it, they think you're a genius, they think you're an idiot, they think whatever they think. But it's just kind of like, I touched somebody, I got somebody to think, I pressed a button, for good or bad or whatever. But it's not like the stuff is out there and it's just kind of like floating around in the aethers and making no impact or effect on anyone. But when it comes back, that's what you're doing. You're connecting to people. You're making them think. You're making them feel. It's one of the most gratifying things. And again, I'll just say this for my own conclusion here. I mean, it's like, actors, learn to write your own material, because it's one of the things you can do that enables you to continue practicing and honing your craft while you're waiting for the phone to ring between auditions. And you just, if you're really genuine with yourself, if you really put it out there, and even if nobody's going to see it other than you, the fact that you got it out of your head, out of your heart, and out into the world, that's what creativity is about. That's what acting especially is about. I mean, it's like you have these scenes and scenarios and characters and conundrums, and you get it out of the head and out into the world, and that's what you got to do.
That's part of the beauty of where we are now, is that you can do that. You can record yourself, you can put it on YouTube, you can put it on TikTok, you can put it on Instagram. I'm always surprised. I mean, I don't really, and I need to promote more on YouTube, but the stuff I put on TikTok and the stuff I put on Instagram, but particularly TikTok, I might, put it up, and by the time I finished putting it up on Instagram and then uploading it onto YouTube, I'll go back and go, oh,
Yeah.
TikTok, 500 people have seen it in the last hour?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
And, and I'm not looking at making, a ton of money. It's just nice to have your art and then to have people comment on it. But what I will say for some of the aspiring writers out there, I will post a link. The Studio Binder, particularly if you're a writer, is a great resource, as is the Script Lab. The Script Lab, again, you can just leave your email and they won't, be spamming you, many times a day. You might get a couple a week. But what's nice about Script Lab is you can download, pilot scripts. You can download Oscar-winning scripts like The Holdovers and Poor Things and things like that. So you can really look at that particular, what is that all about? And I will tell you, recently I did sit and watch The Holdovers. It is a beautiful, brilliant movie. And Divine Joy Randolph, who won an Oscar for Mary, and that as the grieving the private school cook who's grieving the death of her son in the Vietnam War. Just because he was going there to school, he couldn't get into college. And, back in 1969, 70, 71, had the Vietnam War. If you couldn't get into college, then you were going to have to enlist in the Army. And that was pretty much the way the draft worked. And her son was thinking, yeah, when I get out of Vietnam, Mom, I'm going to go to college. It's the GI Bill. And unfortunately, he passed away before that happened. And then her performance is just so beautiful. But that's a good script to look at. What is the inciting incident? And that one, it was the term, The Holdovers, is you have all these young men in a private school, and sometimes their parents can't take them. You had one young man who was from overseas, and his parents couldn't come and get him. So they were just kind of stuck there. Then about 4 of them leave, and then you're left with just the one young man, and then Mary, and then Paul Giamatti's character, who, again, he's so good, so brilliant. And what I loved about that movie, too, budget was $13 million. So a fraction of what you would find with a Marvel movie, and it made $44 million. 3 times its budget back. Did it make Barbie numbers? No, but the supporting character, Davine Joy Randolph, won an Oscar for it. And again, a beautifully nuanced performance. But, just as you're writing, and there's a lot of different creative writing sites. If you're just like, I just don't know what to write, they will send you a daily creative prompt. You can go to Five Below and get a book that says My Daily Creative Writing, and where it's either set up whether you can go on your computer or you just open it up and you handwrite something in there. There are those resources for you, and when you're looking at movies and you just want to see, well, what's the inciting incident? What is it that makes it go? For instance, Wizard of Oz, tornado. Took Dorothy's house off of there. Finding Nemo. Nemo's actually accidentally taken by a diver, and then his father's got to try to go find him with Dory. Jaws, the first shark attack. Rear Window, a woman screams, don't.
Mm-hmm.
And JB, who is played by Jimmy Stewart, is trying to figure out what the heck. I mean, say what you want about Alfred Hitchcock, and he was an a-hole, but he knew how to set up shots, and he knew how to, a lot of times, just set his movies in 1 or 2 places and go with that. Rear Window is Jimmy Stewart and Grace Kelly looking through a neighbor's window and trying to figure out what happened to his wife.
I'll give you one. Lifeboat.
Lifeboat. Also, when we're talking inciting incidents, The Bicycle Thief. That's a pretty brilliant film.
Okay.
Because if this man's bicycle had not been stolen, and the movie actually takes place 3 years after World War II.
I haven't seen. I saw it so many years ago.
I know. I'm sitting there going, "Oh yeah, I remember seeing it." But it ends up, that inciting incident ends up taking him out of his usual, world of putting up posters on all these walls in Italy, and meeting a young man, and the two of them are trying to get his bicycle back. That's as simple as the plot is, but it's all that nuance. Get Out. Chris agrees to meet Rose's family, and Rose's family are not who they think they are. At first, you're thinking, oh, they're nice white people that are so supportive, and yet not so much. No, not so much. So, just kind of think about, as you're journaling, and something we tell our actors to do is journal as your character.
Yep. That
can help you find some insights. And then, as you're looking at the different scripts and things like that, where is the all is lost moment? In a movie like Castaway, when Wilson floats away and you hear him scream Wilson, because he's been on this island for years and he's made this little Wilson sports ball into his friend. Pretty profound loss. And it's an inanimate object, but he's really given it so much that relates to him. Little Miss Sunshine, you have them going in this van trying to get where they need to get to. They've lost a grandfather, and, finally they get to where they need to go, and it doesn't seem like it's going to be. And then Olive gets up there and dances, and all of a sudden that just renews the family's love for one another. Home Alone. Some people would say the all is lost moment is when the wet bandits get Kevin, but other people will say the all is lost moment is when Kevin feels like nobody's coming back for him, and he goes into the church and sees old man Marley. And that is probably, we use that in our script analysis classes, one of my all-time favorite scenes, because it shows shifts in status, and it's just a beautifully well-acted one. And then in Elf, when Buddy finds out that his dad doesn't want him there and he runs away. So whether it's a comedy or a drama, you need to have, again, the inciting incident. And then, as you go through the all is lost moment, there's a lot of theories on how you get there. Save the cat. There's beat sheets, and I will also include that in the notes. So if you just want to click in and see what Studio Binder has to say about Save the Cat. But, the beauty of writing and either producing your own stuff or just writing is you're creating your own world. You're sparking places in your brain. And we talked about the creative brain, when you're trying something new, that's the firework, a synapsis that's going. And that's just, it's so important for you as an artist to do, is take that time and create something. I did a couple of TikTok videos where I'm an Irish mother, and then I've got a daughter who's talking to me, and I hadn't really tried intercutting two different characters with myself. And I'm like, okay, it's still a little rough, but I wouldn't have thought to do that. So you can play off yourself, you can write things for yourself, but the idea is get creative and just see what comes out. Don't judge it. That's what stops us so often, don't you think?
Oh, yeah.
Is the judgment. Yeah, we talked about that in the beginning. Yeah. So anyway, guys, I hope this has been helpful. Thank you all so much for listening. Like I said, I will leave a lot of those links and resources in the show notes. So if you guys do have different ideas for what you'd like to see us do, again, you can get creative and let us know. We are on Instagram, we're on Facebook, we've got a LinkedIn page, we're on our website. You can always send an email to kelly@creativeactorslab.com, and, just let us know some of your thoughts.
Indeed.
All right. Well, thank you again, guys. You have a great rest of your week.
Much love, everybody. Till next time.
We appreciate you guys tuning in, and keep in mind that you can catch us on our social media, Creative Actors Lab on Instagram and Facebook, and by the same name on YouTube. And for more on what we do, you can go to our website,
creativeactorslab.com, all one word. Thank you for listening. Stay curious, make art, not war. Much love until next time.